Okay. Hello and welcome to Virtual Coffee Brownbag Edition. We are very, very excited to have Justin Noel here today. These brown bags have been a great way to supplement our regular Tuesday and Thursday meetings, to learn a little bit more and to get a better understanding through all of our community members who are so generous with their time. Virtual Coffee's mission is to be a welcoming tech community that allows room and growth for all, and to create opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone. To find out more about Virtual Coffee, you can check out virtualcoffee.io. We are very, very excited to have Justin Noel here with us today, and I want to thank him for being here. He is going to be talking to us about discovering Cloudflare Workers and KV. But before we get to that, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on Justin. In 2013, he left his boring enterprise developer position at the telecom industry to jump into the exciting world of mobile app development. His own personal apps have not made him rich, unfortunately. So he's been a contract mobile app developer for many years and just finished working as a React Native developer for a major e-commerce company in the fashion industry. Now he is underemployed and enjoying dabbling with lots of new tech. So who knows what the future will hold. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Justin.
Thank you. Glad to get to present. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. And so as Becca just covered, there's my cheesy bio. And if you'd like to reach out to me at all, here's all my social links. And so let's get started. I used to be a Notion user. And recently I switched over to another note-taking app that I prefer, and that's this here, InkDrop. And InkDrop I really like because it lets me code or take notes, 100% markdown, no converting my text as I type and things like that, which is something I don't really like. So if you've ever used Notion, you know that you can publish your note to them and people can access it, and they can look at it, they can click and maybe log into Notion, things like that. And InkDrop does something similar. You can see your notes in InkDrop. Now, it wouldn't normally look this bad, but the way I use images, my InkDrop can't what's called hot link them. And so that's why you're seeing these errors right here. But there's a couple of problems with both of these. And one is that, you know, there's their marketing on it. Not too big a deal. On InkDrop, it's a little bit stronger. But the other part of it is how much is going on behind the scenes when you're a user. So I'm going to refresh this in Notion, and I'm going to do the same thing in InkDrop. Now let's look over here at Notion, and you can see that we just transferred 2 megabytes of data to display what really looks like quite a simple page. And a lot of this is analytics. They've got their own analytics. They're using Segment.io. They're talking to Intercom for some reason all the time. Intercom is like a support system thing. I don't need all of that for my simple note. And I really don't like all of the privacy invasion that's going on there. Now, if you look at the number of requests, it's like 39 requests. Well, if you sit on this Notion page long enough, it will get into the hundreds of requests because it's polling nonstop and sending information about the viewer with analytics. Now, again, that was 1.29 or 1.92 megabytes. Let's just get rid of my images because that's not really fair to blame Notion for that. And so I've gotten rid of my images by filtering them out. And you can see I'm transferring 1.7 megabytes. That's just crazy. So let's see what it looks like on the InkDrop side. Obviously, much better, much less going on here, but we're still transferring 286 kilobytes for what doesn't look like a lot of content. A lot of that is Where we go there, Google Analytics, which I'm not a big fan of that. And again, we don't have to worry about the images because they're not displaying anyway. So again, I'm just not a big fan of Google Analytics or any other third-party analytics looking at me. But let's look at this from an SEO perspective. If we come over to the inspector for, this is Notion right here, and we look in the head, you see like the Twitter card is Notion stuff, not mine. Same thing with the title, and all the other graph stuff is Notion's information and not mine. And if you look at the meta description, look at this here, a new tool that blends your everyday work apps into one. So they're really using my content, if I shared this out into the public, to advertise their own service. And I certainly don't like that. Now, fortunately with InkDrop, it's much better than that. So they use my content as the title. Now they're still using the site name for InkDrop. They're using my description, but because it's markdown, it's kind of messed up there. And the same thing with the Twitter card. At least they're trying to use my content. So InkDrop does a much better job of that. So our goal today is to get all of this content out of InkDrop and put it in my own content mechanism. And so that I can get the SEO benefits and people can link to it from my blog and things like that. So first, before we can really get into that, let's talk about Cloudflare. So Cloudflare Workers are a relatively new aspect to Cloudflare that's always been really good at doing denial of service, attack prevention, things like that. But they've got tons of other functionality. And one is Cloudflare Workers, which is a serverless backend. Okay. Now, unlike most serverless backends that you're really running Node in the background, Cloudflare is actually running what's called an isolate. And it is the Chrome V8 engine running on a server. And so it's really fast. Now, there's some downsides to that. The first is that you can't use many packages that require Node.js. Anything that needs file system or things like that, you can't access those via Cloudflare Workers. But one of the really nice things about them is that most serverless endpoints like Amazon Lambda and many others, they have what's called a cold start. So say somebody hits your endpoint and that instance has to spin up. It takes a little while to launch. And so the first load is kind of slow. And then after that, the instance stays up for a little while in case somebody else hits it. And if they do, then they're going to get a pretty fast response. But after a little while, your instance shuts down again, and next person gets a pretty slow response. Well, Cloudflare Workers are different. When you make an HTTPS request, you do kind of a pre-flight, a handshake that occurs just to create a secure connection between the user and the server. Well, Cloudflare has done something really neat with that. The second the handshake begins, they spin up your virtual or your isolate instance. So there's no cold start. Virtually anywhere in the world, somebody can hit your endpoint and it's going to be there instantly. So it's really nice. The next thing is Cloudflare Workers KV. So KV stands for key value storage. And it's what's called an eventually consistent storage mechanism. So you can put some information in it, you give it a key and a value, and then Cloudflare distributes that data throughout the world. They have like 200 plus data centers, and it moves all of your KV data everywhere in their network. So if you're loaded it up here, I'm in the DFW area, and they use a server or data center names like the name of the closest airport. So DFW. If I load a bunch of data up into the key value storage here in DFW, if somebody in Japan needed to access it, well, it would be quite the long haul all the way from Japan to DFW. But again, Cloudflare distributes your data everywhere. And so the person in Japan will hit that data from Japan, and it makes it really fast. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with that. You would not use this as a traditional database, okay? You cannot do transactions on it because, again, it's what's called eventually consistent. If I make a change to it here and somebody else was making a change to it in Japan, there might be a little bit of conflict. And even if there weren't, my change here is going to take a little while, maybe seconds, maybe seconds, I don't know, to get reflected properly in Japan. So there are some weird things about that. But if you're just trying to get some general content out without needing to stand up a whole backend database, then KV is incredibly useful for that. Now, Cloudflare has a new offering called durable objects, which are backed off of KV, and they will offer true consistency. And again, they will be migrated all over the world. So keep a lookout for that. So let's give a gentle introduction into Cloudflare Workers. So I'm going to create a worker, and this is what one looks like. And in fact, I'm going to make this a little sample VCIO. And let's see here.
Justin, do you mind zooming in slightly?
Yeah. There you go.
That looks great.
Okay. So I'm going to save and deploy this, and it's going to be called this, and I'll share this in our Slack real quick, or let's see here. I'll share it in Zoom. So give me a second here. I can't access chat. All right. I don't know how to get access to it. All right, there we go. It's chat. And I'm going to paste that in there. And if y'all want to, y'all can go hit that URL. And you're going to see the same thing I'm seeing, which is hello world. Okay, so that's kind of cool. And again, this is going to be distributed all over the world, and every change make in here is going to reflect to y'all. Now, what this worker looks like is an event listener. So it's going to listen for any fetches. And if it gets one, it's going to handle it with this request function here. Now, you don't need the handle request. You could literally do it in line here, but this is a common pattern with Cloudflare. So once it gets any request, it's going to respond, hello world, with the status of 200. So I hope y'all can see that. And let me get this stuff out of my way. And you go away. Okay, so that's kind of neat. So let's modify it just a little bit. I hope y'all have all had a chance to try that. And now I'm going to save and deploy again. First, let me test it. I'm just going to send it locally. And I'm going to save and deploy. And oops, I'm sorry, guys, I messed up. Let's just replace that part. And I'm going to save and deploy. And I'm going to send. Okay, and so what I've done here is I've got a request, and I'm going to get the URL out of the request URL so that I can pick apart the path name. Now, as you can see here, let me make this a little bit bigger. I don't have any path. It's just a slash. So I could say hello. And now my path is /hello, and I can add some more junk to it. Blah, blah, or let's say hello VCIO. And that's what we're going to get. So if any of you are out there doing that, that link I sent out here, you can do the same thing. All right. So let's make it a little more interesting. And we're going to change the handle request and put some more info in here. Now, this is a really bare bones sort of router, okay? And you would not really do this in production, but it works for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get the path out of the request URL. And by the way, this request is very similar to Express or any other Node.js based HTTP servers, where you get a request, you get a URL, maybe the request body, that kind of thing. But you don't have to set up a backend for this. It's just there for you. Okay, so I'm going to take the path name, And I'm going to replace any slashes and things like that. And then I'm going to split it on the slashes in the path name. And it's going to create an array out of the path name. And it's going to pick off the first member of the array called a greeting. And the second part is the name. So let's do that here. I'm going to say hello world and sit. And it tells me the greeting is hello and the name is word. I can't spell. Hello world. And let me deploy that so y'all could try it too. And the other is nothing, okay? And the reason is I didn't add any additional things to the path. So I'm gonna say goodbye and send that. So now other is goodbye. Okay, so what you can see here is with this handle request, I can start to do whatever I want to do with it. And it gives you a lot of functionality. So today we're going to talk about like replacing my ink drop notes with my own version, but you can use this for so much more. You can proxy requests to another server. If you have seen me on Slack, you see that I share picture from my own domain. And what I'm doing there is I'm using a Cloudflare worker to proxy those URLs to a DigitalOcean storage space that's S3 compatible. So let's keep going, and we're going to make our router even more complex. And I'm gonna, let me test it first, make sure I didn't screw it up. That didn't work. Okay, so let's do this here. Sorry, I've got something wrong here. Oh, okay. So what's happening here is I'm going to get rid of this goodbye. And I'm going to send that now. And hold on, if not greeting, if not name. Bad records 200 is not, well, I'm running into a bug, so give me a minute here to figure this out. Return, I'm getting a 200. Oh, I'm doing the right thing. So no, I'm not. I'm going to reload this, so give me a second, everyone. And let's test that again. Okay, and now I've got to put hello world. There we go. Okay, so let me save and deploy that for y'all. And basically, anything I put in here, and I'm going to make this a little bigger and that a little smaller, I can say hello, Jen, and it's going to say that. And I can also say goodbye and send that. And if I use something else like buzz off, it's going to say bad request. So let's talk about what that's doing here. So I'm trying to get the greeting and the name based on the URL. And if I don't have a greeting or I don't have a name, I'm going to respond with a bad request. Then I check, is the greeting valid? I mean, we don't want our website to say some inappropriate things to people. So if they didn't give a valid greeting, we say a bad request. And this valid greeting checks to see if the greeting is hello, goodbye, or greetings, right? And if so, it's going to return whatever you put here. So I'll do that again. Hello. ECIO. And ta-da. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? But in a real world, you would not want to put some production code in a web editable script like this that is really hard to access. Anybody can screw it up. You don't have version control on it. It would be kind of a nightmare. Now, having said that, I used to work for a multi-$100 million a year e-commerce company that a very critical part of our infrastructure literally ran on a web-coded little script like this. Now, it was literally like 4 lines, but it was very critical to us. So it can handle just about anything you throw at it. Okay, but again, we don't want to do this in real life. So we're going to, oh, I'm sorry, we've still got a little more to talk about here. I'm gonna go into my workers account, and I'm going to create a new, what's called a namespace, because we're going to literally use the KV right now. So I'm going to add a new namespace called workers demo. And it'll take it a second to get there. And then once it's added, well, hopefully it adds soon. I'm going to reload there. There we go. So it finally added, and here it is right here, the namespace. So I can view that. And as you can see, it's just like kind of a table name, basically. Now, it doesn't have any values in it. So I'm going to give it a key of greetings. And here's my goal with this. Our code so far, the actual worker, it's fixed in stone. And what if we wanted to add some more greetings more easily? Maybe a non-developer needed to add more functionality to this, like they want to be able to say buzz off this time. So we're going to add that in our key value database. And there it is. So now I can actually access this in the code on basically the global window or global instance inside the worker. So let me paste that in there. So we're still doing the same thing, but now we've replaced our get is valid greeting. Instead of a hard-coded list, we're going to say, hey, in the workers demo namespace, get the key called greetings and consider that it's JSON. And if you look at it again, you can see it's a string, but it looks like an array. So when it's fetched, it's going to be encoded as JSON. And then we're just checking, does the greetings array include whatever the user sent in? So let's check that out here. Let me move that over a bit. And we're going to send it. Oops, let me save and deploy. Hope I didn't mess something up. Send. Oh, I know what I've done wrong there. Okay, I've asked for this workers demo namespace. Now, I don't have access to it. That's why it's 500ing on me. So what I can do is I can go into my workers, and here's this VCIO worker. So I can click on it here, and I can associate a namespace to it. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to add binding, and give me a second. I think I called it workers demo. Yeah. And we're going to call it workers demo, and we're going to give it access to that namespace. And let's hope I've got it fixed now. Sorry about my notifications. I just can't disable them. Okay, so let's try again. And let's deploy that again. And let's send. There we go. Okay, so again, that's a mistake I frequently make. You have to take this, you've got to make this global variable point to a namespace, okay? So now I can say other things like goodbye world. And that works. And I can even do the buzz off. Oops. I think sorry, I've got buzz off done wrong in there. But as you can say, we could say something like inappropriate, and it's going to say bad request, but I can switch it back to hello world, and we get hello world. So what we've done there is we've used KV as a bit of a database, a data store that can be easily updated without having to modify our script or modify our worker and impact production. So now, as I was saying, you would not want to do this in real life for anything of any real importance. So we're going to introduce what's called Wrangler KV. Okay, so I'm not really going to do these commands because I've already done them, but I'm going to show you what it looks like to add Wrangler globally. And let me zoom these in a bit here. I hope y'all can see that better. Okay, so I'm just doing yarn global. You may use NPM, and I'm adding a package globally called Cloudflare Wrangler. And then there is a bit of a problem with this. Wrangler is very much in development right now. Sometimes it's a little unstable. And so they just released a new version, and there is a bit of a problem with it. So just in case you need to solve this problem, I've added a note in the in Cloudflare Wrangler issues with a comment, and what that is going to do is fix the problem where Webpack's not available. So I'm going to go in my library caches and Wrangler, and I'm going to run yarn, and that'll install Webpack, which is preventing my workers from working because I'm using a Webpack type for them. Okay, so if you're following along and you needed to figure that out, I'll have the notes for that so you can do that as well. Now, the next thing you would do is you actually run the Wrangler command line. And I'm going to make that just a little bigger. That's as big as it can get. And I'm going to say Wrangler, generate, and then the name of the project that I want. And I want the type to be Webpack. You can just do JavaScript if you want, but then with Webpack, you get the nice way to import instead of require and all of that stuff. So I prefer Webpack for that. And then the next thing you would do is you would change directory into drop notes. And then you would log in using Wrangler, and that would be Wrangler, if I can type, login. And then what that will do, it will ask you if it can open a browser. When you say yes, it will open your browser, log you in via your already logged in instance in your browser, and then you would get access to Wrangler in the command line. Now, what does this look like when you generate this project? So let me come over to code, and I've got this all prepped out here. So this is what you get. Now, I've modified mine slightly. I've reorganized it. Let me make that bigger. You can see that I've got a source directory and some prettier configs and package JSON, that kind of thing. But the most important thing is this Wrangler TOML example or sample. Now, obviously, you would change the name to TOML. I don't want to show you my real TOML because it's got sensitive information in it. So you would give something a name, and really you wouldn't need dev there. Again, I told it I wanted it to create it by Webpack, and then you would put your Cloudflare account ID here. This workers dev true lets you launch and publish your worker to a Cloudflare owned domain that they give you a subdomain off of it. So it's really easy for testing, especially if you don't have your public URL available yet. The route, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the zone ID applies to what domain in your account do you want this to apply to? So say you have abc.com and xyz.com. Each of them have a zone ID. You want to use them. You want to put this in the domain that you actually care about. And I've got a Webpack config for development that makes logging, things like that easier. And then I've got a production environment. And again, you don't need this. Sorry, that's old. And I've got a Webpack config for production that basically just tells it, hey, compress and all of that good stuff. So that's pretty much what you get. And by default, I don't want to save that. You get the same thing we got in the on the web page editor. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. We're going to do Wrangler preview. And it's going to actually launch the, it's going to launch a worker and spin it up for us. Now there's a weird bug with the console down here. I'm going to drag it, and I've let go of my mouse and it just kind of follows my mouse. So you have to click again to make it let go. Okay, so let's test this. As you can see, it's just going to respond hello worker, and that's exactly what it's doing. So let's make it, give it an asterisk and wait for a second. Now, unfortunately, you're not developing locally here. This is not running on your local machine. This is literally getting shipped up to Cloudflare, and occasionally, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do watch. So give it a second again. And now if we reload here, let me close that instance. Okay, so now you can see my asterisk, and let's change that so you see that it's really working. And I'm going to say hello VCIL. And in just a second, it'll update. And there it is, VCIL. So that is one of the kind of the tough things with emulating online services, is that if they do give you kind of like a local dev environment that's tries to replicate their infrastructure, quite often something's not there. You know, the database isn't there, or some other function, some secret storage isn't there. So Cloudflare just decided, you know, we're not going to do that, and instead we're going to let you run in our cloud as close to you as possible. So this is running in it's running in the DFU data center. But it does slow you down a little bit, so it can be a little tough sometimes. Now, I'm going to modify this a little bit more. And again, our goal is to get rid of this ink drop version and produce our own. So we got a little more work to do. So I'm going to create a, oops. I'm going to create a KV here, and I need to, I think I've actually sort of messed up my notes. Give me 1 second, guys. Oh yeah, I need to check out a different branch. So I'm going to get checkout main. And I need to undo that. And now I'm going to check out main and close that. And now I'm going to check out the next package. And that should give me a new TOML. Okay. Sorry, guys, I got stumbling a little bit there. Oh, I don't actually need to do this because I've already done it. So I would create a namespace from the command line. And again, let me zoom that up for you. And so I'm saying, hey, Wrangler, create a KV namespace, call it notes, and use it in the environment. Okay. And what that'll do is create a namespace for me like we did here, where I created this namespace, but I'm doing it from the command line. Okay. And then the next thing I would need to do is I would need to update my TOML sample. And I would tell it, well, in dev, I'm going to use the binding, the name or the variable name ink drops, and I'm going to bind it to that KV namespace I created that has an ID. And then there's this preview ID thing, and I'll talk about that later. Now I'm also going to do, at the same time, I'm also going to create a, I would also do -- environment production. And then that would spit out a production namespace ID, and I would put it in here. And so that way, you don't want to be making modifications while you're developing and accidentally impacting your KV storage in production, like say you're adding a new feature or something. So that's why you want to make sure you have two namespaces, one that is specific for the dev environment and another one specific to production. Now you can create as many environments as you want. You can have dev, staging, staging 3, 4, 5, you know, whatever. And you just put them in there like this. And then when you try to do anything with that environment, you have to tell it the name of the environment that you're using. Okay, so now let's keep going here. Now the next thing I would want to do is I would want to actually store some information in the in KV. So I'm going to do this here. And what that would look like is, hey, Wrangler, in KV storage, put, and this is the rough command line, using a namespace ID, put a key and put this value in it. So let me show you what that actually looks like. Give me a second. Let me copy it here. And I'm going to do a slash, so, oops. And I'm going to do this. Well, there we go. Okay, so again, I'm saying Wrangler, put in my namespace ID this. So you know, you consider this like the name of the database, like it's a staging database or something like that. And then I'm saying put in there a VCBB. I don't remember what that is. Hold on a second. There we go. VC, Brownbag, Cloudflare Workers, KV, ink drop notes. It's kind of a mess. And I'm putting that information in there. Okay. And next I would do the same thing for production. So I'd change the namespace ID. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying for this route here, the ink drop node ID that I need to fetch from their API is this thing right here. And my ink drop account is this. So if I ask for this key out of the database, I'm going to get this object that's a string as a value. Okay. So what does that look like? Let's come over here again and let's look at ink drop notes dev. And you can, oops, I can look at KV here. And here's the dev. And this is what I just created right here. So it's this path or this note or key that I've given it, and that's the value. Okay, so basically I'm just putting data in a database. Okay, now you can also see that I've added some other endpoints, this ink drop endpoint. So I know the API endpoint for ink drop, and I've also got this thing core CSS, and I'll explain that later. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a sample of this here. Let me see, where's my commits? Okay, there we go. And I'm going to jump straight to this commit here. Okay, so now that I've changed things up quite a bit, I need to watch or preview again. Okay, and sorry guys, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Let's see. Okay, so I've added that's a bit too big, I'm afraid. I've added a bit of code to this where I'm importing a library called ID router, and I'm importing my own HTML template, and then I'm creating a router. And so I can put in here very similar to Express or Happy or any other of the Node.js servers you've seen. And I'm saying my HTML template, I'm going to pass it an object, and the title is going to be these doggo woofs, and the content is going to be what's called doggo ipsum, and I'm telling it it's text HTML. Same thing, if my path includes an ID, I'm going to show you that as well, but I'm going to change that to where you're showing a particular doggo ipsum instance and some more doggo instance. So what's this HTML template look like? I'm going to open that here, and all I'm doing is exporting a template, letting it receive content, CSS, and title, and pardon me. I'm going to replace the titles, or I'm going to put the title in there, and I'm going to put title in there, and then I'm going to serve that. So let's see what that looks like. So if I add my URL to notes, you can see that I get this doggo woofs. And let me get that out of here. Come on. Okay, and if I give it a particular node ID, I can say 5. And so now I get doggo wolf number 3 and welcome to the neighborhood. Okay, so this is just basically bare bones HTML, no styling, and I'm gonna actually add some styling in here. I'm gonna get a link to what's called a classless CSS. And let's refresh here. And now you can see it applied the CSS to it, and it looks much better than it did a few seconds ago. And so that's the beginning of transitioning this to getting my ink drop data. And as you can see here, I've added some logging. Now be careful about this. As you can see, I've added logging in here, console logging in various places, okay? These are logs that are going to take place on the server. They don't take place in your browser. Now, the reason you see them here is that this is a special preview browser where you're literally running the instance in a browser instead of on a server, okay? So that's why you see these logs. In real life, you will not see these logs in the user's browser, so you don't have to worry about those being there. Okay, so that's interesting enough, but again, it's not my note, so let's keep going here. So give me a second here, and let me get to those notes. And okay, so let me check out my next branch. And I'm gonna check out main again. Oops, I gotta get rid of that change. Okay, and now I can check out my main branch. And let's see. Now we're going to check out this commit. And let's run our preview again. Okay, so we're in our preview again, and let's go see what our code looks like now. So I'm going to go in here into my index, and now I'm doing the same thing. I'm still showing the doggy thing, but I've added this thing here called get note. Okay, so it's a function that I've added, and I've changed it from an ID to a slug, and I'm going to go into get note. And this is just a function that is going to clean up all of or go get the information from InkDrop and then display it or convert it to HTML. So I'm importing my HTML template. I'm importing a helper function called getJSON, which is just a fetch wrapped in a try catch, so I don't have to do it everywhere in my code. And so what we do here is we're going to log the slug that we get from the router. So again, the router is going to send a slug. And here's where we're actually going to start talking to KV from our Wrangler. We're going to say, hey, Wrangler, get ink drop notes. Actually, this isn't Wrangler. It's now how Cloudflare Worker get from the ink drop notes KV the slug with or the value or the key with the value of the key of that slug, and then it's going to log it a little bit, and then it's going to also get my ink drop endpoint that I logged or that I saved. It's going to log that and a few error checking. I'm going to kind of speed up here, and then it's going to call the ink drop API to get my JSON, and then if it's got it, it will actually convert it to HTML from Markdown, and possibly apply some CSS, and then it's going to convert it, or it's going to render a template. So let's see what that looks like now. So I'm going to go to Notes and 1, and ink drop notes is not defined. Give me a second here. I did all of this in advance, and oh, I know why. I'm going to do Wrangler dev because I didn't push up preview. I hope this works. Okay.
Someone in the chat said that you wrote a D instead of a 1, so not sure.
Yeah, I did. I did that on purpose, but it gave it actually was telling me that my namespace didn't exist, and that was my fault. So now I'm going to say this, and gosh, all right. Let's see where I've gone wrong here. Give me a second. Oh, I know why that is. Sorry, guys. Ink drop.
Don't be sorry.
Let's see. Let's go back to workers. You know what, guys? I am going to just kind of jump ahead because we're almost running out of time, and I don't want y'all to not get to see everything here. So I'm going to get back to my main branch, and I'm going to cancel this, and I'm just going to jump over to, let me show you, once I publish this, give me a second here. I would do Wrangler publish dev, and I'd also do Wrangler publish production. And once I do that, it's going to give me some URLs, and let's show you what those look like. Okay, now that is a really long, ugly URL, and it's that way on purpose. So as you can see, it took my previous ink drop code and fetched the markdown out of it. And let me show you what that looks like real quick. So when I call the ink drop API, it gives me a body which contains markdown, and the title and things like that. And so I'm taking that in my HTML or out of the markdown, I'm converting to HTML, and I'm displaying what's really in my notes. Okay, but notice this, that the URL, and let me copy that so y'all can see it better. It is ink drop notes demo dev Justin CF. So this is the Cloudflare domain, and they're giving me a subdomain that I can display stuff from. And the production one is also there. So let me change that to production, and you see it there as well. Now it's different now, and it's because I'm pointing to a different note. And after this session, what I'm going to do is document everything I've talked about here, so y'all will be able to read it here. Okay, but I still really don't like that massive, ugly URL. And so what you can do is you can use a route in your Wrangler TOML. And so you can see it right here. So I could change this to Justin Noel dev, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not actually going to do that right here because it's not the right domain for this instance that I'm running on. So I'm going to change it to this. So it's going to be Cloudflare Workers KV, and I own a URL called codedemos.dev, which I'm hosting all of these demos that I put up there. So when I push this to production, it will use this route, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to do that here, and I'm going to replace this whole ugly URL with this one, and oops. It didn't work. Why is that? Okay, the reason is I'm using a subdomain of my main domain, but the problem with that is it doesn't exist. I don't have a CNAME for this Cloudflare Workers KV demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a CNAME, and I'm going to point it there, and then I'm going to call it that, and I'm going to point it at my root domain and save that. Now, if I try again, it's still not going to work, and I'll explain why in a second. And it still says it doesn't exist. Well, there's a couple of things there. One, it takes a while for DNS to propagate throughout the network. But really, the problem is that my Mac has that URL cached, and it says it's not resolved. I'm going to do a sudo, and I'm going to kill my DNS, and I'm going to put my password in. And now, hopefully, if all goes well, fingers crossed, you will see that now my domain, codedemos.dev, is hosting. Now, I don't have any notes. That's going to say not found. And if I go back, then it's hosting what previously was available in InkDrop. So again, quite a lot to do there. But this is just like any backend service. You get used to the methodology of working in it, then you get used to the complexity of it. And so for y'all looking at this, you might be like eyes wide open, like, oh my gosh, that's so much stuff. But in the end, once you're a speed on it, it's not a big deal to recreate this. So let me again just show you the last bit of that code there, now that it's been updated. So again, I'm doing this stuff here. If the route is notes, then it's doing one thing. If it's notes with a slug, then the slug is this part right here. If you're familiar with most content management systems, they use a term called slug for the URL. And it just goes and gets the note from InkDrop, and it converts it into HTML. So here I'm asking InkDrop for my specific note. Now I'm also doing something a little bit unusual here. Let me show you here. Now notice that in my elements, if I've done this right, I'm not requesting the Sakura CSS anymore. So why does it still have nice styling? And the reason is I've modified my code to inject the styling directly in the HTML. And I do that here in my workers. Oops. I do that in KV. I've stored all the CSS in advance. And that way, you can see it here, like here's my InkDrop demo. Here comes the CSS, and you can view that. And it's just this big giant file. And what I do inside my template is I replace the CSS right there. So that does me a few things. One, it helps with privacy because I'm not fetching data from a CDN. So there's no tracking added to a request to a CDN like Google Fonts or Google any of the things they host in their CDN. And it's also really speeding up my page because I'm not doing multiple requests to get some styling. So let's look at Lighthouse here real quick. And I'm just going to run it as just a desktop, not a PWA. And as you can see, I get 99% performance. I get a little accessibility to solve, and my SEO is a bit messed up because I don't have a description in it. And I'm going to add some functionality to be able to add a meta description. But here's the most important thing to look at. I'm going to get rid of all the PNGs again because that's not fair. And oops, I want a negative PNG. So this right here is my analytics service. I use a service called Simple Analytics. It's very private. It doesn't require cookies. It's GDPR compliant, all that good stuff, just so I have an idea of how many people go to my blog and things. So no third-party trackers, but here's the entire code right there, or the entire response. And as you can see, I transferred a whopping, it's hard to see that, 156 kilobytes. Okay, so again, with Notion, we did something like 1.77 megabytes and 66 requests so far because it keeps pinging away. And with InkDrop, we transferred 321 kilobytes. But when you really just shoving out in HTML, it was a whole whopping 156 kilobytes. So you can really get some nice performance improvements. Your users all over the world will get this instantly because Cloudflare is going to serve these from the edge. So Germany, Russia, you name it, they get it instantly. And it's incredibly fast. So that is my presentation. I hope I covered enough there and not too much to scare everyone. And if you have any questions, we can discuss them now if we have time, or just throw them in the Slack channel and I'll be happy to answer them there.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. I know we are right at time. There was one question in the chat that I noticed. I'll go ahead and throw it out there if there's a short explanation. If not, we'll go ahead and put that in the chat. So Mike asked, does Cloudflare cache the output of the worker?
Yes. Okay. So you automatically get that caching locally. Now it'll cache it locally at your airport data center location. If it's created again in Japan, like within an instant of that, then they will cache their own version. But if it's a little bit later, the cache will actually propagate across their whole CDN. And so the people in Japan would get their version.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. There was so much information there, and I know that a lot of people would love to go back and watch this again. So we really appreciate you letting us record this. If you do have more questions, please go ahead and throw those in the Brown Bag channel and tag Justin in those. Again, this was really great, and we appreciate you doing this for us. So thanks everyone as well for being here.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Justin.
Bye.